for the next couple of years. And so we're really not going to touch the capital outlay. We're not going to try to take any money away from what we prioritized. We're just going to use the excess that's coming off of that capital outlay to maximize our general fund capabilities.
So if we were to move those amounts and build those in the budget, we would have to back off some of their cash funded capital in the current year.
So you've allocated the $1 million in here. Did you use any of that interest to go to their cash funded capital?
Yes, some of it is used to go towards that.
Okay.
Yes.
What would that cash funded capital come down?
If we were to move the interest of $500,000, the franchise fee of say $588,000, and potentially the payment in lieu of property tax of $214,000 or so, we would need to back it off by $1.3 million or so. And then we would have to watch it very closely over the next few years to make sure that it is properly offsetting. Otherwise,
Sure.
We'll have to adjust the rates.
And you could set that up in a way where the intention is not to pull away from cash funded capital, but because we're so heavily funded on debt funded capital, and we have 5 years of that, that we could at least give ourselves a 5-year look and know that future council could see the wisdom in reducing that and going back to cash fund capital as those bond proceeds are expensed.
Yeah, if council wants to do that, we could build it out that way.
So-
Potentially.
Yeah, I agree with the mayor on that plan. On the, just walk me through 13.1 million. So that's technically cash funded capital, right?
That's correct.
So where did the 13.1 come from? Excess revenues?
Yes, so we did have excess reserves of about $5 million from this past year, and part of that was excess revenues, and part was underspending expenses.
So excess.
So that's part of it.
Excess reserves from last year.
That's correct. That's $5 million of it. And then part of it is we had targeted somewhere around $2 to $4 million annually in cash funded capital, so that's part of it. And then the other piece of it is on their debt service. We are not at full capacity on the debt service yet because we haven't issued all the debt yet, and we didn't have the coverage ratio, or we didn't have proper coverage because that fee increase was so new that we had to structure the debt in a way that it kind of ramps up into debt service over the years. We normally budget that completely flat. I'm sorry, we normally issue debt and we structure it where the annual debt service payments are completely flat. We could not do that exactly in this case because that new revenue source, because it was so new. We were maybe 5 months into it when we issued, maybe 6 when we issued the debt. And so the bond underwriters were not comfortable yet because there wasn't a longer history of it. So that is something that we will have additional debt service coming on in the next couple of years. And so that will either have to come out of that, $2 to $4 million cash funded capital, or we'll have to look at raising rates, or we'll have to reduce these new revenue sources to the general fund.
Well, can I disagree on that? We put the rate in that would cover the full debt.
Yes.
And we implemented the rate, not over time like we do with, say, a bond on property tax, where you implemented it on day one.
Yes, that's correct.
So we're pre-revenuing. So it's not cash-funded capital that you'd be taking it out of. You'd be taking it out of the monies that have been revenued in order to support that debt.
So and let me make sure I understand. So the challenge is we didn't adjust the rates for this $1.3 million that we would potentially be giving back or sending over to the general fund. That's where, yeah, that's what we would have to adjust in the
that
future.
That 1.3 wouldn't be reflected until you lost the interest earnings that would help to offset that.
Potentially, yes. Yeah, the interest could help fund the cash funded capital until we're out of it, and then we would have to look at either reducing cash funded capital to keep this in place,
right,
or adjusting the rates.
Right, and I understand that, but then you're also revenuing in advance of expenditures, so you should be building up that pre-revenue account that would help offset that for a period of years.
So we have pushed all the pre-revenue into cash funded capital. So we don't just have it sitting in a bank account with excess
Right, I
reserves.
understand.
We're having
What's the cash funded capital goal? 2 point something?
between 2 and 4 million.
Oh, okay. And we're at 5.
We're at
Excess revenues.
13.1 this year.
Oh, cash funded capital sitting at 13.1?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, I apologize.
Oh, that's
I
okay.
thought it was 5 point something that we had
No.
in cash funded capital.
No, it's,
Excess revenues last year was 5 million.
That's where that number
yeah,
came from.
underspending and excess revenues created a $5 million excess reserve. So that can be spent down this year as 5 million of that 13.1.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, council, just in caution, when we got elected, we had a lot of people that were criticizing the fact that the drainage tax, as it's called, was being spent on other things other than drainage prevention. And so we need to make sure we're showing our citizens that we're putting every dollar into drainage that we can, and that we are solving that problem little by little. But then also, we're being good stewards of that money, and if it's just revenue and interest, it doesn't do any good to sit it there while we have roads with potholes that we bounce across. And so the ability to move some of that back to the general fund in order to put that money into streets, as long as the citizens see that it is being expensed for them, they understand that it's all legal, then I think we get by with this. I think if it ever looks like it's sitting in a hidden fund somewhere where there's other things going on, then this looks like they said it would. And so we want to make sure that it never looks like anybody ever criticized it, to become. So that is caution for us in trying to design this. So full transparency, very upfront, lights on, working with it, but then a lot of accountability in how much we're getting done out there in extensions and pumps and so on and so forth.
Yeah, understood. And keep in mind, too, that we were not, if you think back to 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of the projects that we have that are identified in our capital plan are very large projects. And so we didn't have a large amount of money. So some of that you are stocking away a little bit to take care of that. Well, now it's freed this money up to where we can do the 4.3 million worth of projects that we have money, we have cash money to spend on. I might mention also some of the things we've done this year. Alan mentioned the Lawrence Lake Inlets. I mean, that was a project that was very worthwhile doing that. In fact, it's really, I've never seen a project done like that before, so we're very proud of that one. We've also, looking ahead to Playa 7 and realizing that the flooding issues that occur out there, getting ahead of that and getting a temporary pump in place while construction or plans and construction is being done for the permanent pump out there is another project. We have added new software to our sweepers so that we can have better sweeping routes. I mean, I think we're being a lot more aggressive now, knowing that we can spend some money, and that's a big relief to all of us, if that's a good word to use, because we want to be able to put that money back into the drainage infrastructure that's out there. And I think we're on the road. I think you're going to start to see, especially over this next year and moving forward in the next 5 years, great improvements. Still, not everything is going to be done, and it's not ever going to prevent us from flooding, but it's going to put us in, we've got the needle moving in the right direction.
Other questions from council? You have something, Alan?
Yeah, I appreciate you. I guess you read my face. One thing, this is a perfect time to mention, and this is really just from an operational standpoint. You're probably aware that we have a new drainage utility superintendent in Thad Diaz. I think a lot of what we're seeing in our proactiveness in maintenance is it's his responsibility. It's his fault in a good way. The times where in years past a pump might have been run to failure and, well, okay, $90,000. He has his staff checking these things on a regular basis, daily when they're running, weekly and monthly when they're not. And so we're catching problems before they become catastrophic. I think we saw that earlier this year with the West Pump at Lawrence Lake. They just noticed that it was having some vibration issues, making some strange noises. They were able to get it removed, diagnosed. We found out the shaft was broken, didn't run it until we destroyed the motor and the pump, and we're able to get it repaired and back in the hole, I think, within about 5 weeks. Whereas before that would have been run to catastrophic failure, it would have been a 4 or 5 month lead time. So I just wanted in front of y'all to say that Thad Diaz, our new drainage utility superintendent, and the team that he has there is doing a lot in ways of preventive maintenance and keeping our operations going.
So you're going to make me say this too, and when we reorganized Public Works 9 months ago, We're so glad that Alan is back because he brings a lot of expertise to the table when it comes to the engineering side, and then able to hire someone like that. So a lot of credit goes to Alan as well for what he's doing over there. He's doing a really good job, and I love the team that we have. It's making a huge difference.
Hey, Alan, are we seeing, good job on the pumps, catching that. I mean, Floyd knows that's been kind of one of my pet projects, one, because I get this all the time. So are we seeing that report? So I've requested a report like monthly or one, an accountability issue for you guys to say we are checking the pumps, to show capacity of the lakes, pump operation, are they running, are they not running, that type of deal. Are we seeing that reporting to where it's front-facing to the public as well?
Yes, our drainage utility website is updated every Monday morning with the lake level percentage and whether or not the pumps are on. We have selected a consultant and had an initial meeting with them last week. That's West Consultants, to install lake level monitoring infrastructure so that instead of it being a visual inspection that has to be performed weekly, it can be real-time data that is put on our website where anyone who wants to see it can go and look at what the level of the lake is. I'm very excited about that. Donnie, you want to talk more about it?
In talking to our contractor, thank you, Floyd, we told them that we certainly wanted that in place by March so that we could be ready for the spring rains, and they felt like that was something that was very possible.
And council member, I want to add that Donnie and Alan have been very responsive on that, and I'm proud of what they're able to accomplish for you.
Good. When does the dredging begin?
Yeah, so that project's under design as well. We had a kickoff meeting. Kyle might be able to speak a little bit more to it. I was just a participant in the kickoff meeting for that project. Do you want to talk about that design?
Yeah, that's fine. So absolutely, we've got a consulting engineer on board who's done dredging projects before, and so came and brought some expertise to all three of the locations that we're proposing. There is going to be some conversations about some at least easement or land leasing, because this is that process, and the process that they believe they're going to be recommending to us. I say believe because they are going to look at a couple options, but right now the front running is kind of the sluice box option where you're basically kind of pumping the lake out and then you run it, pump it up the hill, let the water run off, and collect the sediment and silt in that area. Well, that takes some space, and so we're looking for some solutions there. Maybe looking for some cooperation from adjacent property owners, those types of things. But at all three of those locations, we're developing. They may be unique solutions for all three locations based on those kinds of things: land acquisition, how much space you have. But we're absolutely around the middle of that design process and engaging those adjacent stakeholders.
Good. Thank you.
So just at a higher level, talking about this franchise fee, so in the water and sewer, how much did we say that we had coming out of water sewer going to other places? 15.6 million?
It was a little over 15 million.
And so the law allows us to be able to use some of that for, I guess, property tax was part of it, franchise fee. We issue debt. And I guess this is a pretty common tool that municipalities use.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, the thing I want to be cautious here, because what I'm concerned is happening, and not only here, but you see it across the country and the state of Texas, is how far are we behind on our water and sewer lines? And is the reason why we're so far behind on our water and sewer lines is we wanted to keep property taxes low. So we said, well, we got to go get some more money to fund our property taxes because we don't want to raise taxes. And then, we're just, look at this cash cow over here. And you look at all across the country, and you see the infrastructure is the problem. And that we've got to figure out how to resolve that. And I'm hoping out of this on streets, on drainage problems, on water and sewer, that we can see a comprehensive plan. I want to know, how long is it going to take us to catch up? And I like the idea, but what I'm concerned about is, we're going to be a couple more years down the road, and instead of going to streets, it's going to pay, something else. And so that's my concern. And I think we've come, we're looking at it, but to me, it looks like that's how we got into the problem with our infrastructure and water and sewer lines that are decades old and have not been replaced because we've been sucking the money off of that and putting it into the general fund or issuing debt, paying for city hall, those types of things, when we know we've got a problem there.
Understood. I think you started off that comment or remark with, you want to be cautious here. And so like that's a great outlook. It doesn't say like, hey, I don't want to look at this or we can't go this direction. It says, hey, I want to be cautious as we travel down this road. And so we're looking down 3 or 4 different roads here. We want to measure and weigh all of them. They don't all travel the same. You know, one's really smooth, very, very little risk of falling off in the ditch. Another one pretty steep and kind of treacherous, and you can end up in the ditch over there real quick. And they have different liabilities and different risks. And so I think we want to comprehensively bring all that back together from our policy ability and then really rely heavily on the staff to make sure that we understand your needs accurately and you understand what this council's willingness is to do. Because previously you may have had different direction, and I think you definitely see 100% commitment to infrastructure, from this council. So we want to maximize that. So Councilman, well received on that. Anything else before we try to get a recess? What do you have left to tackle by 1:30?
So we just need to go over and we need to do fleet, and then we need to wrap up a couple loose ends on capital and do CP and DE's budget, which will be really short.
Laura, we also have solid waste too.
Oh my goodness, and solid waste.
Okay. Let's
you,
take
Don.
a quick one. It's 11:20. Let's be back in here 11:30, and then we'll have to take another short break just to grab some lunch, and we'll probably try to eat through lunch with the funeral issue today. Thank you. this work session. We wanted to tackle solid waste first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
We got
let's do
3
solid-
left, and then CIP doesn't have much left,
No,
right?
we're pretty much done with
Okay.
CIP. Or we've got a little bit to talk about. So on your solid waste group, hang on just a second. If I can get to the tab. Utilities, right? Okay, so solid waste collection starts on page 571. All right, so we've talked about solid waste already a little bit. The big item that is already built into the budget is about a $1.7 million ask to convert those remaining hand-picked up routes to the polycart routes and to get some additional trucks and routes together for those new developed areas that don't have that service yet. And so it's about $1.7 million to do that. That would be about an 8.5% increase for your customers. And what that translates to is, I'll find the page number and I can show you all that. And it's back, and I'm sorry these books are so big and clunky, but if you look on page 17, back at the very kind of front of your book, we have what those rates would look like. So your most common rate, which would just be your one family residential fee, would go up $1.94 per month is what we're looking at to cover that service. Now, it goes all the way through, your multifamily and all those as well, but this is just proposed on the residential side. Is that correct, Donnie?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. So, and did you want to give a little bit more detail? Could you outline how many trucks and
Sure.
people and all that? Thank you.
And I think it would be good to, we have a new boss, and I think it would be good to catch him up on a little bit of the history of this. So, and you're probably familiar with it. In 2018, we identified several areas in our community that were not as serviceable by side loader trash operations. Due to that analysis, and that would be for areas that had dead-end alleys where we would have to back out. There were safety risks there, an alley that was too narrow. Also areas where dumpsters were being serviced in the streets. And then in combination of that, our bagged collection routes, which, as you know, in Amarillo, we've had some areas that we hand collect. The bags set out on the edge of the curb, and then we come by and pick those up with a 3-man operation. So this was an efficiency move from that analysis. One of the goals of that was to change all of those bag routes over to cart collection routes. Well, we've grown that program over the years. I think we've done a good job of phasing out the bag collections, but now, due to other needs and because of that move, it's allowed developers to say, hey, we want to develop our new subdivisions with no alleys. There's several of those that are going in. I can think of Estancia, the Trails, Tradewinds, Vineyards, that will require cart collection for their trash. What we've had to do in the past, we get a new subdivision on, we would have to convert it to bag collection instead of cart collection because we simply didn't have all the equipment. We currently have 5 ASL trucks. Those are on multiple routes. They run 4 days a week. They pick up those carts, twice a week collections. There's 7,789 current customers on that, and that was as of January this year. We actually just reduced that number. Was actually higher than that, but we reduced it down back in January. The ASLs can pick up about 700 customers a day. So we're right at the fringe of being a little bit overloaded right now with our current cart collection. So we really need to have 7 trucks to service what we have now, including getting rid of the final 640 or 612 customer hand collection routes. And we also need another truck for growth because as we see these other neighborhoods coming online, we need to prepare for that. Now we do and have addressed in our annexation agreements when we have a new annexation coming online to have that as part of that growth package for that annexation to be able to pay for their proportion of a new truck and personnel to service that area. However, the developments that are already taken place have already been annexed, and so we're having to provide that service. So this really is to take care of the 612 remaining customers that have not been converted and also to have a piece in there to prepare for the growth that we know is already happening today. It also provides us with the opportunity with that rate increase to continue to add those ASL trucks and personnel as we move forward with new growth.
So I think what council may have had a few discussions on, just in kind of the thought process of the need for these carts, would be funding residential versus commercial side in a rate increase. Did you give any thought to maybe where we could capture that additional money?
Just a rate increase, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, we're, and this is just on the residential side, to answer that question. We don't have any commercial accounts that have these type of services.
Say that one more time.
So we don't have commercial accounts that have cart collection.
Right, I understand. So if you look at the commercial side versus the residential side, the expense revenues are quite drastic. So commercial tends to be a little bit more, carrying a little bit more of the financial load already. Is that correct? But then if I remember right, commercial had the largest margin from like our competitors. So we were pretty much underpriced in comparison to our competitor.
Yeah, that's a correct statement.
Okay. So, council, if you guys want to weigh in on for or against a residential rate increase, maybe that'll give us a direction of kind of how we need to move forward.
I have a question, I guess. By these new subdivisions going without alleys, they're able to put more houses on the market, correct?
Correct.
So they're putting more of a cost to the city, but they're making more profit at the other end.
Agree.
So why aren't we spreading the cost to these new developments that they pay for this?
We are, and I think Andrew could probably weigh in on this on the planning side better than I, but we are working on that in the annexation agreements, and I think that's where it has to take place. I really think once that subdivision is already developed, it's already gone through the annexation process, it's already ready for all the services that we said we were going to provide. That makes it a little difficult for us to do that. But
yeah, recently we had our first annexation where they agreed to pay a couple $100,000 toward a new truck as a revenue source to help pay for that. I think you can also look at it two different ways. With them not doing alleys, they're actually helping us out because we're not maintaining those alleys long term.
Yes.
And just having the roads to work with, so there's a little bit of a balance there.
Do most of these new subdivisions, do they have their own pit or what?
It just depends.
Yeah.
We do have a couple that are planning to do PIDs for their projects.
I mean, that might be another good place to recoup some of our costs, because what's happening, people are making lots of money and we're eating the cost of it. And we need to make this equitable. I mean, we need to create growth. Mm-hmm. But while we create growth, we also need to cover costs. I mean, just because the developer can sell 10 more lots with 10 more houses, he's made a huge profit at our expense because we're giving him land. So I think it's something we need to consider going down the route we're going and try to figure out what we need to do.
And I think we're on the same page with you on that.
Donnie, can you refresh me on what we did last budget year with these fee changes? Did we do anything?
Alan, why don't you,
Yes.
if you can, or maybe
No,
Laura
go
could probably
ahead.
remember
Alan,
too.
you're good.
No, I can't off the top of my head. Laura, do you have that information?
So we did do a rate increase. I say that. Y'all keep talking. Let me look that up real quick. So.
And the reason that I can answer that is I was afar last year when we went through the
I
budget
think the
process.
biggest rate increase was to help pay for the dumpster replacement program.
That's right. That's
Yes.
correct.
And I believe, did we just do that on the commercial side? I think.
we did.
Yes.
I'm looking that. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'll have to look that up.
Outside of a rate increase, do you have any other ideas or anything that we can do to achieve this?
I don't.
It'll be 1.7 year over year continuing, correct?
Correct.
I just have a real hard time charging customers that have the alleys and everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the part we got to figure out, because they're paying for somebody else's profits.
Well, a couple of things just to counter is, I mean, if they're building more houses, that's probably going to give us more property taxes. And so if they're building 10 more houses, so that does pay us back a little bit. You know, of course, the world is not fair, but the truth is people who have had to dump their trash on their sidewalk in the front have been paying for everybody else's dumpsters. You know, and so, you know, now we're looking at that, I mean, and saying, you know, I mean, I'm all for trying to figure out another way to do it, but I don't know. I used to live in a neighborhood where twice a week the sidewalk would be just littered with all the trash bags, and some would be, you know, good, some maybe not so good or whatever, or they open up and then they leave, you know, liquid there. So I think this is a good solution. I now have a dumpster, but you know, if you look at the people that have been subsidizing our dumpsters and they don't get one, and now, you know, trying to figure out some way to help these people that put the trash out on the sidewalk to get something that's better than just putting trash out on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and to Andrew's point too, we're not maintaining alleys, which I think is a problem.
That's right. Yeah, they're saving us from illegal dumping. So
True.
Yeah.
And this is the same conversation I think that many councils for the last 100+ years have had about how do we raise the rates here? No. Do we transfer money in from another utility? Maybe yes. Do we raise taxes? No. And so I think it's these kind of conversations that I think have led to a little bit of taxes, lower taxes, rate increase, no increase, water transfer, no water transfer. So this is, I think the goal should always be to try to get the utility itself to pay for itself. And that's why, like a solid waste, the goal would be to have it housed within the solid waste instead of having through a tax or a water transfer or some other fee. That's the unfortunate goal, I think, in order to try to get us to where taxes pay for tax things, utilities pay for utility things, solid waste pays for solid waste. It's that eating it back that way.
Yeah. Donnie, this kind of off topic, kind of not. Are we concerned? We're one of the only municipalities that use the side dumpster, right? Side load dumpster truck.
No.
Not?
In the side loaders with dumpsters?
Yeah.
No, we're not the only community that does that.
Not the only, but there's very few. Is that
Texas Panhandle and I would say the big country area are pretty unique to the rest of the country. However, there are other areas that use dumpsters. But I think predominantly, I mean, even when I was in Austin, it's all cart service. Everywhere you go, you're going to see that in the larger cities for sure.
Trust me, I'm not advocating for carts.
Yeah.
Just make that clear. I'm not. But I was just concerned, is that something on the radar that we're looking at? I know those side load trucks are extremely expensive.
I think side loader trucks are less expensive than cart trucks. In fact, it's pretty close to about half, about $200,000 versus $400,000 for an ASL truck. But that's kind of irrelevant. What we wanted to do when we originally put this program out, and I was here when it rolled out, was just to identify areas where we were struggling with our side loader collections. Because still, even if you decided to go to it, well, and by the way, the public opinion that we got was no, we are not in favor of cart service here.
And no, that's not what I'm comparing. That's what I was saying. It's kind of off topic. I'm not comparing the carts with this. It was just a concern that was brought if this is a viable term for our side dumpsters. Forget the cart service.
Yeah,
just totally stand alone.
I think it's sustainable for a long period.
Lori, you may be able to help me walk through this. So we revenue, $28 million in solid waste? And our expenditures are $16 million?
And you kind of have to look at them kind of net together. So you've also got your disposal side.
So 16.
Yes. And
plus.
so it's got about 3.8. Let me get back.
So 3.8 plus 28.
Yep. And then
About
their
31.
expenditures as well. Yes.
So 31 million revenue.
Yes.
Expenditures is 16 plus 6.
And then we have the $1.5 million going for the dumpster replacement program as well. And they're also helping pay, they have a debt service payment related to the landfill project that we did year or 2 years ago. Let me look at it real quick. It's in the back. Your debt service
31.
is
31.
sorry, there it is. Okay, about $500,000 a year.
So is that, the 24 department requests, is that including the,
Yes. The additional, yes.
okay.
Yeah, the additional revenue and the additional expenses in that 24 request line item, or column, sorry.
Gotcha.
Yes. So maybe to your point, Councilmember Kraft, we had done this several years ago, and I know I've looked at it a few times over the years because, yes, you net those together, and that's a large net number to the general fund. However, if it was a standalone enterprise fund of some sort, we would be looking to do similar things. We would really have to do in that case because we do have outside competition. We'd have to keep it more equitable with the private entities. We would have to have a payment in lieu of property tax. We would have to have a payment in lieu of franchise fee. We'd have to have an admin fee. They would have to cover all their own depreciation, those type things. And so being in the general fund, we don't have individual line items for that because anything that they net just stays there in the general fund. Other questions on solid waste collection? Otherwise, I know Donnie has another item he'd like to discuss with you all.
Yeah, Councilman Kraft, are you still looking?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. My request would be to get a proposal on the commercial side of a fee increase that would revenue the money, or to look at this as existing revenues that justify the expense.
Okay.
And I think that's probably the direction that Kraft was going. Is that correct? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so second item we want to talk about, and this is just coming back to something that we discussed at many council meetings. I'm going to give these to you, Stephanie, if you don't mind. I'll pass these out. I'll kind of walk you through this. This is going back to our bulk waste pilot program that we had. To go through what we came up with a plan to address, and there's three different options on here. It's not saying you have to do any of the above. It's just three different options that we came up with, one of them being a very comprehensive plan, one of them being a mid plan, and then one that's just that would be us servicing it, and then a bottom. We'll go through the first one. The scenario one is a full comprehensive plan, and basically what this includes is LPR cameras for all of our places where we have our roll-off containers. As you recall in the council meetings, we have a lot of issues with our roll-offs. The customers in the community, the residential customers, love them, and so do the commercial customers, and they're continually filling those up and causing problems for us. So we got to have a way to monitor that. We talked about enforcement. We mentioned that several times, and I think council had an appetite to at least discuss that. This first plan includes an enforcement piece with 2 code enforcement officers, 2 code enforcement vehicles, talking with Jacob Diaz in the marshal's office to be able to handle that and go out and write citations, with the plan of being, hey, if the first time is on us, the second time would be an issuance of a citation and charges given back to that customer if we had to go clean it up. It also includes $800,000 for contractors, multiple contractors to come in like we did with the pilot program to take these work orders and go do the cleanups. Brush site improvements at our 2 brush sites where we would put some roll-off containers in there, open those up every day of the week. At least we'd probably do like Tuesday through Saturday at the brush sites all day instead of the partial hours that we have now, so that customers could utilize that. That gives them a tool to where they don't have to put it in the alley. Now they have a resource that they can take it to if they should desire to do that. Also, the creation of one centralized convenience center as well that would have roll-off containers and would be open to the public the same hours. Employees for those convenience centers, boom trucks to help us with our cleaning out of the roll-offs, because that's something that we saw during the pilot program, is that they were very taxed with that, and we were unable to keep up with our front yard collections because our drivers were spending their time reducing the waste out of those roll-off containers, and additional equipment operators for that. That's scenario one. It's obviously the most expensive. It comes in at about $2.1 million. These are just estimates, by the way. I think depending on what council's direction is today, we can go back and we can really refine these numbers a little bit and get some better costs for you. They're pretty close, I think, to what I'm comfortable with, but that's about a 12% increase if we put that toward just the residential rate. And again, you have many options there with commercial residential. City operated program number 2 is no enforcement, no cameras, but it's basically us doing the operations ourselves. What we would do is get 4 rear loaders and 4 personnel to drive those rear loader trucks. The plan would be to take the new program we just talked about with the ASLs that are currently sometimes being done with rear loader trucks to pick up the bag collection that's on the roadways, taking those utility workers and moving those over to the alley cleanup crews that would be completed with this scenario too. That's about a $1.3 million impact, but again, it has no enforcement, no cameras. This is just us sweeping the city segment by segment. We would just do it probably in quadrants of 4, and we would just separate those out and just continually do that year round, and it would continue through. Option 3 would be to have no enforcement, no cameras, and 1 sweep per year by a major contractor that would come in. This is about an $800,000 cost. The way we came up with that number is based on previous contracts that we've had before. We think we can probably do the entire city one time with that $800,000. With all that said, you got to keep in mind that the biggest issue that we saw with our pilot program is the regeneration of that waste. We would go clean it up, and within 4 to 6 weeks, it was all back. In fact, that's the case now in all 3 of the areas that we've cleaned. We've seen almost 100% regeneration of that waste in the alleys. So there would also be communication pieces in here that we've talked about before, but a lot of that is just very minimal cost. So those are just high-level overviews of the 3 scenarios that we came up with to address illegal dumping in the alleys. Just to put it before you, you have a discussion about it and give us direction on what you would like us to do. You know, all of them have their advantages. To me, I think more in the line of what are we going to be doing in the future? You know, are we going to continue to do something every year and try to figure out a way to fund it and massage it and build it? We know that if we have an internal program, which will be option 2, that we could have the equipment and the personnel, we could maintain the schedule, and we could operate that. And to me, that's my preference for what I would rather have. Moving forward, I think it's just something that we could continue to do.
Is there particular areas that are really bad?
Absolutely. Yeah, the 3 target areas that we had in the pilot program, but then there's probably about 4 other areas as well that are pretty large. And there's really, if you look at illegal dumping across the city, I think we've only found just a few small areas that do not struggle with illegal dumping in some way.
Okay, thank you.
So being a pessimist on this, I'm paying $1.3 million to have the alley clean for 3 months, and then it's going to be back in the same condition.
And we feel the same way.
I mean, that's a lot of money just for a few months of a clean alley before it's dumped back again, I guess. So,
agree. And that's the struggle that we've had. And this is not unique to Amarillo. This is going on everywhere. Through our research, and I should have probably mentioned that, and talking with some other cities, even the city of San Antonio, who is using an enforcement piece, they're seeing some results from that are positive, but they're still dealing with illegal dumping, and you're still dealing with some people are not going to pay the fines, or it doesn't matter if they have a lien put on their house, they're not going to pay it. So you're still going to be eating some of the cost for that. Somebody is out there is looking for a gigantic solution to this problem, but the best solution I think that anyone has had agrees with scenario 2, that we just got to go pick it up. And that's quite a cost, as you mentioned, at $1.3 million for it to just be a service. That's really what it is. We'll be provided a service. And then you also have to evaluate that too and say, well, is our front yard program really effective now? We saw more front yard collections this past year than ever before, 27,459 curbside collections, which means that number is way up. That program's continuing to grow, and hopefully we could continue to move that program to the front. That's the easiest for us to do, but it's more like that, Mr. Simpson, where we would be running a similar program in the alleys with option 2.
So scenario 2, though, that's not just a one-time deal.
No, that would be annually.
It'd be perpetual, right? I mean, so because we're buying trucks, we're doing all of that, so it would be an internal program that we would have with
Correct.
personnel, with equipment, that we just figure, and is it just for 3 months? Am I missing that?
No.
No.
No,
It would be
that's continual.
It'd be continual.
And by the way, I might mention, and I should have said this, Amarillo had that program previously. It was taken away in 2017.
For why? For what purpose?
I came in 2018, so.
Not my fault.
The purpose was, from the way that I understand it, and it was right when I came on when they were doing this, was that it was not cost effective for us to be cleaning the alleys. But Floyd was here.
Yes, I was. I was here.
He was here when Noah was here.
A little history of that there were approaches and recommendations on that to mimic some programs in Metroplex area and some other areas reflective to not having the alley pickup and having the front yard pickup. And there was transitions in that. Now remember, at the time, there were decades and decades of us training our community to dump in an alley, actually advertising to do that at that point. So it was a transition in an attempt to put it to what was more of a contemporary approach in other areas in the Metroplex area specifically that they believed at the time were being very successful. That's subject to evaluation at this point, but that's what was driving that decision. Was it was against the ordinance already to dump in the alley at the time that transition was made. The ordinance didn't change. It was illegal dumping at that time. For decades, that was just accepted practice, and we had those crews at that time dedicated to alley pickup.
Do we rely on citizens to kind of let us know what alleys need service, or is it us driving? Like how do we identify them? I know what we did in the pilot program, but how are they identified of the areas that need to be done?
We have existing work orders that are reported by, and we are still doing it with our, and I mentioned too, with our Rubicon software, our solid waste drivers are actually taking photos of some of these illegal dumping areas while they're out there. Now that we have that software, they don't have to stop and write down the location and try to figure out where they're at. So they're starting to do that more and more. That's going to be a transition for them to do that, but that's one way that we're getting it. Secondly, we get it reported by citizens constantly. City staff reports it as well. Even our meter readers will report illegal dumping. So does that cover in all the means, I think, of how it's reported? It's mostly customers that call it in.
Okay. I mean, this is obviously a problem I think that we need to address. I think the roll-offs are good. I don't know about policing them with cameras, and I don't know where the cameras would mount, and
we would have to put poles in.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely something we need to address. I'm not opposed to option 2, but I do think it's something that we've got to address. It's a problem that's not going away. And I mean, this one-time thing of doing it, and like you said, it's right back again. But it's good to hear that the curbside pickups are going up because people are learning. Maybe they are reading those stickers on the dumpsters. Maybe they are. And again, maybe we talked about putting flyers every time we do a alley pickup, that both sides get a door knocker thing that says, don't do it.
In some of our brainstorming sessions we've had internally in Public Works too also included the possibility of doing some true advertising, TV advertising, and things where we can actually, just other than social media, where we're having more of a campaign to educate people on the front yard collection. So there's some other things that we could probably be doing better in those areas as well. But option 3 is exactly what you just said. Option 3 just says we're going to come pick it up and it's going to show back up, and next year we're going to spend some more money. And option 2 does the same thing, really. It's just more on a continual basis.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't know that option 1 cures it either. You're going to have, until we figure out how to get citizens to cooperate with no dumping in the alleys, it's going to continue to happen.
But I think notifying those, like if you go to those alleys that are a problem, and again, they're going to ignore it. I mean, we just heard we have 30,000 animal cases that people just ignore as well. So I'm sure
it's the same thing.
Exact same thing.
It's why we put the enforcement piece in there as well, just to talk about that. I just don't know if that's going to cure it or not.
But at least maybe it would some. Like you said, curbsides are going up, so somebody's learning something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good.
How much is in the current budget that's allocated for alley cleanup?
We do not have an alley cleanup program. Basically, what we're doing right now is just subsidizing our collections, and we're putting people in trucks and cleaning them up as we can.
Okay. What do we have in the city marshal's budget for enforcement? Are they already enforcing those citations?
No, we're not doing that enforcement because the tough part is if it's like weeds, it's someone's property. If it's behind their house, we don't know who dumped it there. So you'd have a major uptick in phone calls of complaints if you started enforcing against the adjacent property owner.
That is the proposal, is to enforce it on the property owner?
That would be option one.
Yeah, that's option one, and the ordinances that we have in place do cover that. You're responsible to maintain your property to the center line of the alley.
Right. Well, the pilot program, bulk waste pilot program, using the independent contractors, we had what, five or six?
4. Is
Four.
that right? Micah, was it 4? Okay.
And they did a really good job.
They did.
The projects were clean. The issue was back to current condition 3 months later. Right, so just lack of enforcement.
Lack of funding was one. We didn't really have funding set aside for that, but the biggest issue, was regeneration.
What was the cost of that pilot program?
With the internal cost, I could be able to pull that up, but it seemed like it was somewhere around $200,000 for. Does that sound right, Micah? Yeah, with internal and with what we had to do internally with our staffing and with what we spent on that. I think the contractors themselves is like $88,000.
Okay.
I'm just pulling that off the top of my head, so don't quote me on it, but it's.
And we did that with current staffing?
We did it out of my office, so it was using these 3 right here and one other.
So if you were to continue with that pilot program but fund that, you'd project that up to what cost?
For internal or just overall?
So I guess my issue would be, is it number 2 that hires the outside? Oh, number 3. Yeah, so I would, I would look at that in the way in which you're hiring one company to take over that bulk waste management, but then you're not really accomplishing some of what the pilot program could do, which was incentivizing small business, a little bit of a mentorship, also working with locals. So, I mean, I'm sure you'd be going through your normal procurement. This would need to be a large company, lots of insurance, lots of employees. Costs could grow, I would assume, depending on bulk trash, and then wouldn't expect the same level of customer service that we got out of those small companies normally.
I think you're correct on that, and the way that we paid them in the past was just on a hourly rate. We didn't have to go out, take photos, create work orders. That was the thing that bogged us down on our side. When we hired a major contractor, we just said, and it was hourly, if I remember. Yeah, we paid them by the hour, and as long as that money would last, is what we completed.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing would happen. We'd spend $200,000, and then it would regenerate, and we'd send them somewhere else. But you're right, the customer service that those contractors provided us during the pilot was really good, and their communication with us was really good. And I think they really enjoyed the program. In fact, they were wanting it to continue.
Yeah. So not one of the options you've presented is like continuing that program?
That would be option 1.
Oh, okay. So
option one, and these are all you can mix and match. Option 1 actually has hiring multiple contractors to do the cleanup because we would have the code enforcement officers creating the work orders.
So that'd be more like the mowing contractors we use now.
Yep.
We give them time to clean it up. If they don't, we send our crews, and then we put a lien if they don't pay the bill.
Correct.
That's when we'd utilize those contractors.
Mm-hmm.
We have a concern with interest because we were running 4. We've probably got over 35 or 40 that are wanting to do that during the pilot were calling us and saying, hey, we want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know if it would be lucrative enough for that to be spread out amongst that many contractors. We could get it done really quick.
You would, and then, whether that promotes more trash or prohibits, I don't know. The thing about that is it was small business. It didn't grow liability. It didn't grow government, so to speak, in like more employees, more issues, more paid holidays off. Like this was just getting done, and then the biggest issue was identifying and pricing those loads.
Yeah.
And
Internally,
so,
y'all agree?
If we were to go to, let's say we didn't look at, code enforcement officers and code enforcement vehicles. Let's say that we looked at just a position. If you had two workers out there in two separate trucks that did both, they identified and priced, and then they also enforced. Would you say they could keep up with that pilot program in advance, or are they going to run behind? And so you have more people hauling the trash than you have identifying the trash.
That could be a problem. I agree. And you're saying code enforcement officers or just employees on our solid waste staff?
I think you could do it with regular employees, could you not? Like, what do you need the code
The problem
enforcement?
would be the enforcement piece of that.
Well, as far as citing it and it coming from admin, does that have to be a code enforcement officer
Yes.
that identifies that trash?
Yes. Unless you're going to correct me, Brian, but yes.
Okay. And right now that's sitting in our city marshal's office, and he has one additional hire request. Is that right?
No.
No, we were recommending cutting one
Because he couldn't hire, couldn't fill it.
and to help with offsetting for raises or other needs. Yeah.
Okay.
I did spend some time with Jacob talking about this program and what he thought that it would take, and that was his recommendation. It would take 2 additional over the grass and weed. That's kind of what they're seeing there is a couple of people out taking care of all those. This is very similar to that in the amount of complaints.
Well, it'd be very similar to the weeds too. It's more citizen complaint driven. We're not going up and down every street looking for high weeds.
Right.
We get contacted, we go out, and then we search a perimeter around that location for the most part to be effective.
Yeah, and in fact, that was one of the models that we talked about, was that if you would got a call in an alley at 123 ABC Street, as they looked at that, they would also observe everything else in that one alley and take care of it while they were there and create one work order for that entire alley, which makes it more where we don't have competition out there trying to pick up, that's my trash pile, that's your trash pile. Let's just get one alley segment, which is part of something that was revealed during the pilot program. We started out as individual trash piles. We ended up moving to alley segments, and that worked better.
Okay. Man, I am looking. Going to scenario 1 would ask council if you would entertain closed loop cameras, $50,000. Code officers, I guess you could go with 2 rather than with 1. So if you ramp this up, you're really good. Vehicle contractor services of $800,000, and then brush site improvements will bring you to $1 million. So would be excluding then in part of this plan, if you weigh in on this, Donnie, convenience center creation, wouldn't have it. No employees for the convenience center. No boom trucks or additional operators if we're funding $800,000 to independent contractors. What am I losing there if I cut those?
We would have to make sure that in that contract that those contractors were taking all of the waste to the landfill.
That's right.
They would not be allowed to use the roll-offs.
Yeah, that's right. So, and intentionally and originally, this was not designed for a contractor to be able to go down an alley, put the trash in a roll-off, and then the city have to haul it. It was designed in the way in which you used your apparatus to go through the alley, identify the projects, and the payment was for you to go to the landfill and make your own empty.
We designed it to use the roll-offs just because we wanted to evaluate the program. We wanted to see where they did have the option to go to the landfill, and there was an additional fee that we would pay if they drove to the landfill.
Yeah, and let me go back a step. Prior to your design, the original intent was to have something digitized on the phone where we could post it. They could be included, identified. They have to be set up as a vendor, but then they could select which ones they were willing to haul based on location. But then the hauling was all done, either by a neighborhood or by the citywide, app if we had it ramped up to that, and that took to the landfill. originally.
Yeah.
And I think you guys were improving upon, like for the pilot program, we wanted to see if it would even work with the roll-offs, right? But then that increases our cost $1.3 million.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what does it gain us if we enforce and we spend $1 million a year? And then, council, if this is something y'all want to look at with current budget, like monies that we've got, just because of quality of life and keeping things clean, and that if we don't, we're gonna fall further behind, then I would say part of that 13 million, 16 million, whatever we're working on, maybe trying to push $1 million over there and still continue on with the pilot program.
I think we could continue that program as you proposed. I'm going to let Alan weigh in. Do you see any challenges with that as you think about it?
Yeah, if we're talking about scenario one with the items he discussed, no, I don't see any. You hit the one I was concerned about, which was contractors going to the landfill. Now that's going to increase your cost, which will decrease the amount that can get done with 800,000. But I think it just needs to be evaluated.
Yeah, and we can certainly entertain that.
So Donnie, just to clarify, so these contractors would be proactively going out, or they're responding to the code
It
enforcement?
would be responding to the code enforcement complaints.
Okay.
That's the plan. Until we get technology in place, and I think we're still moving that direction, but I think eventually we would want to have technology in place where we could make this more automated. You're still going to have an enforcement piece if that's the piece you want to go after.
Yeah, I think what we identified is without the enforcement piece, we're never going to catch up. We may be promoting further, illegal dumping there because we're making the alley too clean and then it fills back up. But if we are willing to do the enforcement, then we have the enforcement piece that's also handling the identification. And so does that still work where you get the notice and then 30 days later you hadn't hauled the trash? And then do we have the option to haul that trash, send that warning to that owner, and then once it's back behind that property again, then there's the fine, and that is what's liened?
Yeah, we could do that, but typically you send the notice, give them time to comply before you take action. So we'd have to look at that. If we are going to go ahead and give them the one try, we'll clean it up. It'll spend some of that money down as we work through that.
We thought that the first time would be a good educational opportunity where we could actually have contact with a code enforcement officer to talk to that resident and say, hey, do you realize this is not legal for you to do that? We're going to allow you to do it this time. We're going to pick it up. We thought that was a good opportunity to exercise that. It's just an option, but Jacob liked that idea as well.
Well, I think what you're going to get is that's not mine. I didn't put it there. You can't hold me liable for it, and you're going to fight that. And so, as you can see on the prosecution side with our courts, that's not real valid, right? You'd have a tough time. So, if we geared this in the way of where council could look at this as $1 million expense annually, get into as much trash as you could, but it's got to go to the landfill. I think you'll see, because you had four companies sign up and you had 34 other interested parties.
30 plus. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a lot.
Let's assume there would be, a marketability here for this for people that would want to engage, and that it's well worth it to haul that trash all the way to the landfill if you have that much interest for them. But then the big piece is managing this. Like we were having to go out and identify and photograph and then follow up and make sure it got done. Well, this is going to be handled in those two additional positions.
Correct.
Yeah. So you would have the enforcement piece as well as the identification, work order piece all in one. Makes it real easy for the city to manage that. And then really what you've got is an accounting issue of how you're paying people and, what you're requiring for them to show you that the work was done.
Yes, sir.
I think I would be in favor of $1 million to it for 1 year and then a good review. Because we spent $200,000 to see where we got. It looked great for a short period of time. We identified that a lack of enforcement is not going to work. So then we implement the enforcement piece, we ramp it up to $1 million, and let's see if it works.
We'll come back and review it for budget next year.
That would be what I would think.
Okay.
So how many miles of alleys did we clean up last year?
Oh, man. That we cleaned in the pilot program itself?
Yes. $800,000 got us how many alleys?
I can.
Yeah, they were in your presentation if you have that.
Spent $200,000. And you got
200,000
through North Heights and San Jacinto.
Now, when we did it in the past, we'd do like all of North Heights, and that would take 400,000, 300,000.
Well, we did North Heights and San Jacinto combined one year for 400,000 for just one contractor.
Yeah. So it's not citywide, it's not a segment, it's two neighborhoods.
So miles of alleys, not so much. Now, to go back real quick, sorry to interrupt you, I wouldn't be proposing a fee increase. I'd be trying to pull that out of council's budget.
Out of the 13 million one time.
I'm curious
ongoing.
if council sees the benefit and we push this to the next step before we volunteer our customers to pay for that, right? So
I need to hear some more detail on the enforcement part. I mean, and get the thing about of course, I'm an ideal model citizen, so I've never illegally dumped something in my alley, but other people have. I'm not really keen on the idea of me being held responsible for it. I understand that, but to me, we can invest all the money in the world, but if we don't deter, we're not going to solve the problem. So I'm willing to look at it, but I'd really like to hear some real good detail on how we're going to hold people accountable that illegal dump. Because I'm good for another test, but again, it just seems to me, to clean all the alleys that we have to clean, and when statistics show that we got to clean it once every 3 months. I mean, maybe this is not to everywhere, but I'd love some detail on the enforcement part and how we're going to make that work.
This would be enforcing against the property owner that just happens to have it behind their home, and probably 75% of the time it's not theirs. Because the only way we can enforce against illegal dumpers is if we catch them in the act or have a license plate on camera.
And you have to witness it directly.
And I, as a resident, then need to put a camera on my dumpster to then show that I did not illegally dump it or somebody else did?
We've actually had people do that, that have actually caught people doing it or sent us a license tag. We have a civil penalty in place for that if we have the tag. To answer your previous question, we did 21 miles in San Jacinto, 12 miles in East Ridge, and 18 miles in North Heights. Roughly.
And we have a total, I can't remember the number you gave me on the total number of miles of alleys that we have. 1,500.
500 alleys. Total miles of alleys like 512. Yeah, streets is 1,100.
So 500 miles of alleys, not all of them are dirty, right? But you got to how many, 20, 30, 40 miles, 50 miles?
We did 20, 32, 50 miles, pretty close to it.
Well, I think the 800K will go a pretty good ways then accordingly. And then I agree with you, Councilman Simpson, the enforcement piece is the thing that we probably need to vet through. Because it does put the personal responsibility on the owner, which could be a landlord. They don't even live there. So the issue would also be the consideration of do nothing, which is the other thing of like, well, we didn't put it there as a city either, and we're not going to take anybody's property tax, make less, pay for your alley, right? Well, then we just take the standpoint of you're going to allow things to deteriorate in different neighborhoods, and they're going to look worse and worse over time until you fill them up.
Well, but I think it also goes back to give me, because we could spend how much money for years and years and never solve this problem, and it's eating up money and revenue that we could use on somewhere else, which I think goes back to the enforcement.
Well, I totally agree with that. However, my issue is we've spent money for years and years already combating this problem. It's not like we're the first council to say, oh, that's enough. But we have nothing in the budget. So I look at the budget and I'm like, no, we have monies in the budget. What we're saying is we want to specify a certain amount just for this particular program. So I would be curious what we're already spending and have spent historically over the last 5 years or whatever doing the other programs.
We could come up with a number for that. And on the enforcement piece, he's Andrew stated correctly. The ordinance itself, Brian and I had a conversation about it. We've got the two ordinances that cover that. And basically the property owner is responsible for everything behind their property. Not only can they not place it there, but they're even responsible if somebody else places it there. And really that's the case everywhere, even in the previous community that I was at, which same issue. And we all agree that that's tough if you're not the one that's putting it back there. It's tough, but I don't know how else we would go about it unless you can catch them. And catching them, we found to be very difficult. Even at the places we have cameras, I would say that 25%, I'm just throwing out a number, 25% where we do have cameras where we have a roll-off was all that we could enforce, because the others either didn't have a very clear picture of the license tag. One number could be skewed, and if you didn't know if it was a 2 or a 7, they wouldn't take the case at the court. So even that's not as effective as we thought that it would be.
And once they found the cameras, they just went somewhere else.
Yeah. As soon as they saw the cameras, they started just taking it somewhere else.
And as enforcement, you spend a lot of your time going through the process of enforcement, through the courts, through notices, to give them so many days to correct, and you spend a lot of time, and I don't know the ROI on that, but it's, having done it in Paris, it's very, very, very low.
Very low.
You spend a lot of time for nothing. Then like in Paris, we had the same situation. We just cleaned it up and moved on. So it was enforcement was bogged down, and enforcement, the lack of success in enforcement was always a major frustration. We focused a lot of our attention on that not working. When through the courts, through the process, it's challenging.
So I think you'd be pushing policy measures of, $1,000 littering fine, $2,000 littering fine.
And it's dependent upon the amount, and that's something else. That if you have a repeat offender, it can get on up there to the felony level.
Mm-hmm.
What stops us from maxing it out?
What's that?
What stops us from making it to the full extent of the fine and everything?
That would be something that's above my pay grade.
Remember, they get a trial by jury if they want it. So the jury will be the fighting factor, and they'll be the ones that find the fact and the fine. Or they can have a bench trial on it, but still, judge can set whatever they decide. So
There's all expense in fighting that too.
Mr. Hyde?
City Council amended the ordinance to create a minimum offense offense that you would limit the amount of discretion the judge would have. That's right. And if you only said any violation is $2,000, then that would be the offense.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could set a window fine,
minimum. And if you did that, then the judge would have to go with that minimum window fine. That was about what I was.
So perhaps we are looking at this still experimentally a little bit, and we're willing to go one more year of pushing a little money into this before we see maybe some level of enforcement. It has a greater impact than what we think.
Yeah, I in my opinion, I think it's, I was 22 years in Pampa when I was there, and we battled it the whole 22 years. But I think you have to continually evaluate it every year. I don't think this is the solution from now till the end of time. I think we have to look at every opportunity, just like you said, reevaluate it, come back, and maybe we come up with a greater solution, or we find some city that finally fixed it.
Well, if I could keep us moving, I know we've got lunch ready on this one. If we could get you guys to bring that back, maybe with option 4. Scaled down version of option 1 and a little more data or information on what that enforcement measure would look like, built into a policy look. And then it's 12:30. We could stop, break for lunch. Yes, sir.
Just one question real quick, if I may. Going back to the dumpster replacement program. So we ordered 1,000 dumpsters this year.
I don't remember what the amount was. It was a dollar amount that we ordered, whatever that dollar amount would get. And our second order is about to take place now, or have we placed it yet? I know we had the paperwork ready.
Yes, the second order has been placed. Everything, the money for the first contract is all been accounted for.
So we had money that was already in the budget to replace dumpsters, and then the money that council added last year, and all of that has been ordered.
Right. And so then that cut down the dumpster replacement program from, I think, was it 26 to 14 years?
That's about right. It was somewhere in the 20s to, I think, 13 years was the number.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we know how many dumpsters we've already put out this year?
I could get that number for you. We track that, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah. And if someone needs the new dumpster, who do they reach out to?
They can call the Solid Waste Department at 378-6813. Did I get it right? Yeah. That's the first time I've ever got that number right, so we've made progress.
Well, I like that, when we talk about streets and roads and water and sewer, I mean, this is a microcosm of that, but I like that we have an action plan to do that, and we can tell people that we are doing it and what a finite date would be to get it done. So I think that's, if we can get that same type of information to say, and we've figured out how much we needed to pay for it, how long it would take to get it, how we're improving on that, if we can come up with something with the streets and the water and sewer and that type of thing to say, okay, here's what we need to do, and we knew that on this we need to spend $1.5 million a year for X amount of years, then people can tangibly say they're doing something about that. I think hopefully we could get something where when we're looking at our other public utilities, water and sewer and streets, that we can give them that same roadmap to say, how long is it going to take to solve this problem? But I appreciate that, and thanks for executing on that.
Yeah, we've seen our complaints go down on dumpsters this year.
And where do we store those?
They're all stored at the service center.
Okay. And really, that's about a maximum. We ordered about the maximum amount you could distribute in 1 year. I mean,
we've actually ordered probably more than we can store this year,
right.
but that's okay. As soon as we're getting them in, we're trying to get them out. We also have our welding shop that sits right next to that, so they're repairing the dumpsters that can be repaired. We probably have more on that footprint than I have ever seen at the service center right now, and we've got another order coming. So they deliver them in segments, so they don't bring them all at once, obviously, but we try to get them out as quick as we can. They also have to install the lids on them and get them prepped to go out into the field.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Real good. Want to ask staff and council, since it's already 12:30, we have fleet left, Ms. Stores? Is that it?
We had fleet, we had CP and DE's departmental budget, which might take, 10 minutes, Kyle, maybe? And then the rest of capital, which is not a lot, because we've covered almost all of it at this point.
Well, we could have a little latitude in letting people leave for the funeral when they wanted to, if we're comfortable pushing for another 30 minutes, not taking a break. And then that gives you time to stop and eat your lunch and then go to the funeral, or, however much time you need to eat lunch.
I think we may need some time on fleet.
You think fleet would be better in the morning?
Yes, Donnie.
That's a big budgetary item of finance, right?
We're also talking about leasing options, debt options. I think that one may take a second, but we could probably do CP and DE and the rest of capital right now within the next
So are y'all comfortable with just going another 30 minutes? We try to maybe adjourn here at 1, grab lunch, and then go. And that would give 30 minutes to get through these last two. Tomorrow we'll do our charter amendment meeting at 8:30. Right after that, we'd pick up fleet, and we could jump right into council strategy. Everybody good? Okay. Real good. So let's move on to CPD&E, CP&DE, CPDE&E, or can we rename it?
Please, engineering.
Golly.
As they're coming up to, and I failed to mention, I just want to say Micah Padilla is sitting back there in the back, quietly back there, but she has been a huge part of our budget presentation and everything getting ready for that. So we just wanted to say thank you to Micah.
All right.
Okay. If you say so.
Yeah, that's what I got on the cars.
Right.
If you want to turn to page 601 in your books, this is actually, this department spreads over the general fund and the water and sewer fund. So it's actually in general fund on page 601. And then if you care to flip that way, the other allocated piece of it is on, let me look real quick. I don't know if we have it in there. I don't know if we put a separate one in there, but they have, they allocate a proportional amount of their staff between the general fund and the water and sewer fund, because obviously the engineering group does a lot of work on water and sewer projects. But the rest of their time that's spent in the general fund, the majority of it, I guess, they are charging parts of that out to, like if they're working on a street project or something like that, or a drainage project, they actually charge out to those capital projects, and you see a reimbursement come in on that. And then the rest of the funding resides within your general fund. So what you're looking at on page 601, 602, and 603 is, it's not quite half. I think we had it at like a 48-52 split, something like that. And so with the 52% or so being here in the general fund, so you're seeing essentially half of the department right here on these pages. And so I say that on the personnel.
Yeah.
And then I think most of your expenses, Kyle, you want to talk to that? It's most of it residing here in your general fund
So,
department?
yeah, we do our best to, well, what we did, we created this department in 2016. We didn't really know, and so we kind of picked a number, and then we've been refining that since then. So that percentage of not quite 50-50 is something that gets refined has been refined over multiple years. But, right, we have two business units, which is one being 1415 and the other one being 52115. And so that's why that's divided up into two categories there. In general, the staff workload gets discussed that way when they're billing their time. If they're billing a public works project, they're billing to that 1415, and they're conscious of that, and we track that throughout the year, trying to keep those things equitable.
We do actually put that page right behind here. So if you go to page 604, that's the water and sewer piece. We keep it here so it's all together. That's why I couldn't find it in water and sewer. So you'll see at the top left on page 604, that's 52115. That's the pieces that reside inside the water and sewer utility, okay?
Right.
It does look like I got an email that it looks like potentially they're short one position on their authorized personnel, so we will look at adjusting that. But other than that, no proposed changes in this department from a staffing standpoint or an operations standpoint. Any questions from council on this, or Kyle, if there's anything else you wanted them to know about it?
The thing I'd like to highlight, I think, and you've heard it multiple times, I've said through everybody's presentation, is staffing is a challenge for the engineering group. I call it the missing middle, which is a planning term that I think is really applicable here, because it's very, very difficult to get that middle staffed engineer, middle staff technical expert, where a guy who's not necessarily going to promote into that city engineer or management type role, but wants to stay in those technical design roles and actually producing plans and producing specifications and those types of things. And so we struggle to keep like a senior level engineer on staff. In general, we start with EITs, the guys straight out of college, do our best to build them up, and then they leave. And you've heard that in other departments too, but it's definitely true in our engineering group, and that's probably our biggest struggle. It creates all kinds of little things you might not even think about throughout the organization. Say, for example, Donnie and I had this conversation this week where I'm managing a project as a project manager. I call one of his guys in the street department asking a question, and that guy's like, "Oh, the director's calling." Like, he stops doing what he's been directed by Alan or Michael. He stops doing that because the director's calling. Well, no, I'm just a project engineer. I'm at the same level, but I'm performing that role as a design engineer, and so it creates disruption, throughout the organization, because we really, really struggle to keep those guys engaged with the departments that we serve, and doing good work. So,
Kyle, how has it been since we reduced the ETJ?
Yeah, so workload-wise, we haven't really observed a reduction yet, because we kept everything that was currently permitted and currently under construction. So review-wise, we're starting to see that. Review-wise, we're starting to see that the less number of development projects getting turned in for review. And so I think that will be, I think next year, when we're starting to look at some of these numbers, I think we'll probably start to see some trends that I can point to, but I really haven't seen it yet.
Good deal. Thanks, sir.
Yep, great question.
Kyle, you were speaking about your challenge on staffing. What does your vacancies look like right now?
So right now we've got, I think we're at 5. I think we got 5 total vacancies. two of which are senior engineer positions. And the goal of those two senior engineer positions is to dedicate one of those guys to Donnie and his crews, and to dedicate one of those guys to Michael and the utility group. And that's the piece that has been missing for some time. And so that role falls onto Jackson, the city engineer, also your floodplain administrator, and myself. And the effect of that is less and more inefficient management of big picture items. And I think you've observed that.
Are these positions, are they typically being poached? They go in private sector? Is that what's happening? 'Cause you
Yes.
said this is kind of a perpetual thing.
Yes.
Is it a pay issue? Is it like what?
Yes.
It is. Because they can leave here with the experience and go make more in the private sector.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
Now, I will also say, I have poached those positions, so I have promoted, Marco Lopez was my last senior engineer for utilities, and now he's our assistant city engineer. And so he's, so they are promoting and moving out. But in that senior level, there's lots of private opportunity.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have an idea what the differential is?
In straight pay? Yeah, so in general, across the board, and I've been working with HR for about 3 years now, our goal for the department and specifically for the engineers is to get our pay scale to the 30th percentile of ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineering Survey, trying to be in the 30th percentile of that range. That range is actually an evaluation. We actually worked with HR and came up with how we were going to gauge that. It kicks out the Metroplex because there is such a easy way to transfer jobs in the Metroplex. You've got so many municipal communities right there together. The competition in that arena is very, very fierce. Kicked that out of the measuring device, but we also kicked out uppers and lowers on the private sector as well. So, a guy who travels the world, actually, Michael Price, of our utilities director, made a career of building a hydroelectric dam over here, and then he's building these big projects across the world. That's why you can't tell what his accent is. He's Irish, Australian, something like he can't. And so those guys are on the uppers and lowers. Those specialty type things are outside that range as well. But all that to say that, given us a range, we're in. Right now, we haven't gotten quite to the 30th percentile. We're somewhere in the 20th to 22nd percentile of salaries in that industry. Yep.
Okay, other questions on CP&DE? If not, if y'all want to flip to I say that, Kyle, you want to take them through, I guess, maybe your other book? Yeah, because I think it would be good for council to see what Kyle's prepared as far as some unapproved, they didn't make the recommended list, I guess is probably how we should word that.
Yeah, well, let's just start at the front so you know what you've got in front of you. And so, this smaller book, I've also, the whole thing is on, that's what this jump drive is, just a digital version of the exact same information, so you've got another way to look at it if you prefer it that way. Generally, this table, the first thing you see is exactly what's in the budget book. This is basically what we call our year one list by fund. And so that's exactly what you've been looking at as you've talked through capital and other places. And then behind that is basically a tabbed spot for each one of the departments and that had projects. And so each one, for example, you can flip to the street department tab and you can read a little more detailed description of each of the projects and what their focus on is and what they're trying to achieve. And then, and so that follows suit for every department. And then the very last tab is called our prioritization tab. And what that table is, over the years, this is adapted. It's been our funded, unfunded list. It's been our prioritization list. It's been our approved, unapproved list. But generally, it's all the projects that were requested by the departments for year one. And then they're separated by department by approved and unapproved. And so, for example, on the very first page, emergency management is kind of hard to look at because there actually wasn't one. So let's look at facilities, that 1252 facilities setup right there. There's a gray line that says approved, and then one project underneath that for $500,000. And then the unapproved piece shows you the projects that did not get recommended into the year one funding recommendation. And so that follows suit for each of the departments. You can see the street department, for example, had the 2 bond funding that we just discussed. And if you scroll a little bit further down, you can see there's the 2.587 annual street resurfacing piece under that unapproved list of projects. And so it gives you an idea of both what your departments are asking for in a request for need and maybe desire or wants, and then what the management team and myself bringing you a recommendation for year one being slightly different than what those departments may or may be requesting.
Do we know how many times these things have been on our list? I mean,
sure.
It might have asked 10 years and we still haven't done it.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a growing and perpetually growing list of uncompleted things. When we started in 2016, we called it year 6 because we were doing a 5-year plan, right? And so it was like years 1 through 5 are fiscally constrained into some reasonable expectations of either what we can do with cash or what is capable of being bond funded. And then year 6 is just this $1 billion number. So based on you guys' recommendations last year, we started looking at a 10-year plan. Like let's draw that year 6 out even a little bit further and have an idea of a 10-year. And so when I present to you a finalized CIP document, it will include a 10-year look. There are a lot of projects that are perpetually on the list that we don't get to. Sometimes that builds up and comes back to like a bond question, like similar to what we're doing in what you guys did in drainage last year. Like these are perpetually projects that we just can't seem to get to. Let's borrow some money and get to them. As well as so that's one example of what, and there are others that just kind of perpetually get pushed.
What ends up slating these things for CIP? Any expense over $50,000?
Any expense over $25,000 is by ordinance defined as a capital expense. $25,000 and depreciable. So, in other words, it's something that can be capital or should be capitalized in our budget and then and accounted for.
Kyle, on the land for Fire Station 15, was that not already purchased? Showing up as a $700,000 expense,
Mayor,
I thought we paid.
Yeah, I think I think you're referring to Station 14.
Oh, so 14.
So this would be
yes.
the next one coming
Oh,
up,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. I was confused. So I was
Like
thinking
a
of
feature.
14,
Yep.
paid for construction.
It's all,
everything.
yes, absolutely.
This
Already
is
paid for.
identifying the land for 15 still.
Well, and so what we did there, that's a great question, because their list out for a 5-year term has Fire Station 15, Fire Station 16, Fire Station 17. There is a growth projection of that. The last item we moved up there's $100,000 there in our fire department facilities master plan. That was what we sat down with the chiefs and said, hey, let's get a plan. Let's look at what our growth potential is and what those requirements, what we think those are going to be. It's going to work great with our very new city plan. And we had not only my mind just went blank looking for Andrew, but we had our growth projection information in city plan as well as the future use map that was spent a significant amount of time through city plan. And so utilizing that data as our growth projection, we're going to plug that into a fire service lens and help us project what does that mean. If we're seeing growth in the Vineyards area, what impact does that have to a fire service plan, or if it continues to be west southwest, what are those impacts and how does that look? And so then we'll be in a better position to make where the purchase of Fire Station 15 is not just waiting until it's an emergency or now we need it, and then we can make some better recommendations for those land purchases.
Any other questions on 2 to 5 year CIP?
And Mayor and Council, I think this book would be good for y'all just to kind of keep in mind as we start talking about some direction tomorrow, because there potentially is some one-time dollars that might be available. And so this back section here might be a decent place for y'all to look at if you see something that kind of strikes you that would be great to go ahead and move forward. This might be a great place for you to kind of get some ideas on that.
Yeah. Okay. I'd be happy to talk a little bit about the ones that I feel like are right on the bubble from being recommended or not being recommended.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea.
In my mind, the first ones that come up is the 2.587. That is the street funding. You guys have kind of already talked about that. That would be my number one. My number twos and number three come into the AMW kennel renovation and or they're probably a close second, bolstering any portion of the facilities E&I. What facilities E&I?
So that's on that first page.
Yep.
Kind of at the top there, sort of.
So that list of unapproved projects for facilities E&I, or for the unapproved projects of facilities, what we've done over the last probably 3 years is that it became very, very difficult to forecast the emergency things that our facilities were experiencing. So we were trying to individually budget for a air conditioning change out on a certain building or escalator replacement or whatever, elevator replacement or whatever that is. And what we ended up doing is trying to give Jerry an E&I fund that allowed him to be flexible with that spending. And so if a priority popped up that wasn't the one that we funded that year, he didn't have to go rearrange those funds. He just kind of had an E&I fund that he was spending on multiple projects, whichever one popped up, whichever was his priority. In my opinion, that $500,000 is a great number, and it's a good number that we can hit every year. But anytime we can throw him a little extra to go address an elevator or something that comes up, air conditioner, those kind of things, that's a very good one to look at. The reason I bring up the A&W kennels is that that's a multi-year project. We've been looking. They did a few years ago. They did a full assessment of their facilities. We discussed that during their review. And what we had in mind is a multi-year term where we would try to facilitate them doing segments of that building, segments of what they have over multiple years. This would be the first allocation of construction dollars based on the plan that they have in place to make those improvements. So those probably both fall out in my top picks of bubble projects after street paving.
Anything else for CIP 2 to 5? Okay, so we will have fleet discussion in the morning.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you guys will bring several options.
We're going to talk through some options. Yes, absolutely. So we'll have fleet. But first up, we'll have AEDC right after the meeting. They'll be in here to present theirs. Then we can go to Fleet. And then I asked Casey Stoughton to come back. I was just kind of thinking realistically on time. I asked her to come back maybe about 1:30 tomorrow afternoon because I think given the time, it might be reasonable to do that. But we've got a lot to talk about in between then if we do have some time before lunch. We break for lunch.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
So we had a good discussion with Casey earlier. Is she bringing something back specific tomorrow?
So she was bringing back any options if y'all did want to put additional funding towards public health. Is that something that y'all want to see, or are you kind of holding off
No,
on that?
I
It's up
think
to
it's something to see. I didn't know she would bring it back that quickly, and so.
she's got some ideas already, yes.
Oh, okay.
But it's up to you. I mean, we can bring that at a different time. It's, whatever you guys want.
Well, let's see how tomorrow goes, and
Okay.
if we have some time and she's available, we could hit it.
Okay, that sounds
So-
great.
Okay, so we have lunch in the back, right? It's 12:55 or so we're doing pretty good. I think we should be good here to adjourn, let everybody eat, and then those that want to attend can make their way up to First Baptist. Am I saying that correct, right? Okay. Appreciate everyone being here today. We're adjourned. See you at 8:30 in the morning.